Today we have from the Association Canadienne des Policiers, Tom Stamatakis.
From the Canadian Police Association, the National Police Federation, Brian Sauvé.
And from the Toronto Police Association, Clayton Campbell, as president. Again, thank you all three for your service. I remember the witnesses. I will remind the witnesses that you have 5 minutes for your opening statements, followed by questions from members of the committee, as we have adopted in previous meetings, the time length restricted to each member. I'll go in the order that I presented you. So, Mr. Stamatakis, you first, and then Mr. Sauvé second, and then Mr. Campbell third. So, without further ado, thank you, welcome, and please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation this afternoon and for allowing me to appear on behalf of the Canadian Police Association, which represents more than 60,000 frontline police personnel across Canada. Our members include civilian and sworn law enforcement professionals serving in every province and territory, and large urban centres, as well as rural and remote communities. Collectively, they bring a perspective that is both national in scope and grounded in day-to-day experience. This is the first time we have had the opportunity to appear before this committee since the last federal election. So I want to begin by thanking you for the invitation. I also want to congratulate you, Mr. Miller, on your election as chair, and mention that I look forward to working with you in this new role. Frontline officers are uniquely positioned to speak to the challenges facing our justice system. When Canadians call for help, it's police who respond. It's our members who arrest repeat violent offenders, only to see those same individuals return to the streets weeks, days, and sometimes even only hours later. While it's fair to acknowledge that Canada's justice system generally works well, the persistence of this small but highly disruptive group of offenders places an enormous strain on police resources, heightens risk to officers and communities, and perhaps most importantly, erodes public trust in the system. That erosion of trust is real. Statistics Canada has documented a steady decline in Canadians' confidence in the justice system and the courts. This does not serve anyone well. When citizens lose faith in the fairness and effectiveness of the system, victims feel unheard, communities feel unprotected, and officers feel as though their work does not matter. Confidence is the foundation of legitimacy, and without it, every part of the system suffers. What makes this situation especially frustrating is that both the governing Liberal Party and the official opposition Conservatives acknowledged during the last election that bail and sentencing reform must be a priority. In fact, both parties made specific commitments in response to questions from the Canadian Police Association. As you all know very well, it is rare in Canadian politics to see such broad agreement across party lines, and it would be a profound missed opportunity if Parliament failed to act. Canadians rightly expect progress when their elected officials all recognize the same problem. That is why this committee's work is so important. We hope that your study can move this discussion beyond partisan lines and into the realm of practical solutions. This is not an idealistic or quixotic hope. It is the kind of constructive, evidence-based collaboration that Canadians expect and deserve from their representatives. From our perspective, there are clear and achievable reforms that would help restore confidence and strengthen accountability. Creating a standalone offence for breaching parole conditions to ensure that supervision orders carry real consequences. Mandating the reporting of all breaches by supervising authorities so gaps and delays do not put the public at risk. Replacing automatic statutory release with earned discretionary parole for high-risk repeat offenders so release is based on rehabilitation, not the calendar. Strengthening reverse onus provisions in bail decisions, particularly for violent and habitual offenders, to better protect communities while awaiting trial. Expanding resources for police to locate and apprehend offenders who breach conditions, ensuring swift and consistent accountability. And finally, increased resources to support any changes that are made in relation to bail and sentencing reform, particularly with respect to additional training and resources for crowns, JPs, and judges to facilities modernization and capacity building within the correction system. These are not radical proposals. They are targeted, evidence-based measures that respect the Charter of Rights and Freedoms while enforcing the fairness and effectiveness of our justice system. Most importantly, they reflect what Canadians expect, that when repeat violent offenders violate the conditions of their release, there are meaningful and immediate consequences. Mr. Chair, our members are doing their jobs. They arrest dangerous offenders and bring them before the courts, but without reforms, the cycle of arrest, released, and reoffending will continue to erode confidence in the system and place unnecessary strain on communities. The Canadian Police Association stands ready to work with all members of Parliament and with our provincial and territorial partners to turn consensus into action. During the question and answer portion of today's meeting, I'd welcome the opportunity to provide more detail on our proposals and discuss how they can be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stamatakis. Over to you, Mr. Sauvé.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to appear today. I'm Brian Sauvé. I'm a sergeant in the RCMP and the president of the National Police Federation, the sole certified bargaining agent representing nearly 20,000 members of the RCMP serving communities across Canada and internationally. Our members have varying mandates, including federal enforcement, national security, and in many municipalities and provinces are the police of jurisdiction. They experience firsthand both the successes and the shortcomings of the criminal justice system every day. Tragically, Canadians have seen far too many cases where individuals released on bail have reoffended, sometimes with devastating consequences. These incidents leave deep scars on families, communities, and police officers. They've also shaken the public's confidence in a system that must balance fairness with safety. Now, I want to be clear. Our members believe strongly in the principles of justice, restraint, and fairness that underpin our criminal code and our charter. But they also see the human toll of a system that often functions like a revolving door. Our members are repeatedly arresting the same individuals, often for crimes committed while already on judicial interim release. This is dangerous, demoralizing, and it drains police resources that could be better spent preventing crime. In 2019, Bill C-75 introduced some reforms, codifying principles of restraint and requiring consideration of Indigenous and other vulnerable populations who are disproportionately represented in our justice system. However, 4 years later, municipalities, provinces, and police report that these changes have had little measurable impact on violent repeat offenders or public safety. In 2023, Bill C-48 created new reverse onus provisions for certain violent and firearm-related offenses. These steps respond to some concerns, but they have not addressed deeper systemic issues, such as weak monitoring, inconsistent enforcement, and poor data collection. Canada's criminal justice system also continues to be underfunded, leaving resource gaps that criminals exploit. A disturbing trend our members see is organized criminals recruiting youth to commit serious crimes, knowing that sentencing under the YCJA is far less severe. This places vulnerable young people on a dangerous path and further erodes public confidence. In 2023, the National Police Federation released a report on bail reform. While much of that work focused on what provinces could do to improve monitoring, enforcement, and bail hearing standards, many of those recommendations are relevant to your study today. I'd like to highlight 4 areas where we believe urgent action is needed. First, better data and information sharing. Courts often make bail decisions with incomplete information. National police records are often missing offenses that exist only in local or provincial databases. Judges and prosecutors may not see the full picture of an accused's history. We need standardized, reliable justice system data across all jurisdictions. Without it, risk assessments remain inadequate. Second, improving bail hearing resources and standards. Too often, bail hearings are rushed and presided over by officials without the proper training. We need experienced prosecutors and qualified judicial justices of the peace conducting these hearings with adequate preparation time. Bail decisions are among the most consequential in the justice system, and they must be made with full information and proper expertise. Third, strengthening monitoring and enforcement. Once an individual is released on bail, monitoring varies widely across Canada. Some jurisdictions use electronic monitoring, others have minimal or no supervision. Our members often arrest people who have been released only hours or days earlier and openly ignored their court-imposed conditions. Dedicated bail enforcement resources, including modern technologies and the use of special constables, would relieve pressure on frontline police and provide some accountability. Fourth, addressing youth exploitation. Criminal networks are increasingly recruiting young people to commit violent offenses, knowing the consequences are lighter. Federal and provincial governments must close this gap through targeted prevention, stronger deterrence, and better support for at-risk youth. This is not only about penalties, but it's also about stopping criminal groups from exploiting young people and protecting communities from harm. All of this points to one larger truth. Fixing Canada's justice system cannot be accomplished by Ottawa alone. The federal government writes the criminal code, but provinces administer the courts, and municipalities feel the greatest impact of repeat offenders cycling through the system. Too often, each level of government waits for the other to act, and progress stalls. The path forward requires smart, targeted initiatives developed and implemented collaboratively across jurisdictions. Federal, provincial, territorial, and municipal leaders must work together alongside the police, victims' advocates, and communities. Our members are committed to serving Canadians with professionalism and compassion, but they need a justice system that supports their work rather than undermining it. The National Police Federation stands ready to work with all levels of government to build a bail and sentencing system that truly prioritizes both fairness and community safety. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Soe. For the benefit of members, I am letting the witnesses complete their statements, even if it goes a little over 5 minutes. We do have, unless there's an objection, but we do have a lot of time today, so I think it's important to hear from them unless someone objects. Mr. Campbell, over to you.
I'm only 3 minutes, so I'll share some of my time over to the other side. So, good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the Standing Committee, legislative staff, and other guests. My name is Clayton Campbell. I'm President of the Toronto Police Association. As President, it's my greatest honor to represent more than 8,600 members of the Toronto Police Service, both uniform and civilian. I'm here to advocate for the communities we serve, because there's little difference between what we want and what the public wants, and that is safe and healthy neighborhoods. And despite what some may suggest, I'm here to advocate for fair and balanced justice system. We believe in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We believe in rehabilitation. And we believe in second and third chances. Our suggestions for improving the current system is entirely focused on violent offenders who have consistently shown a total disregard for the safety of innocent people. And they are based on the daily lived experiences of our members, the victims they support, and were developed with the help of talented legal minds. I'd like to start with recommendations to the bail system as it relates to sureties. Specifically, we want legislation that defines who presumptively is unsuitable to be a surety. Currently, anyone can take this role and act as the eyes and ears of the justice system, and being responsible for reporting any breaches of the person's release orders. If that person has a criminal record, has previously acted as a surety for someone who has breached their conditions, or if there is a power imbalance between the surety and the accused, these factors should disqualify them for this role. It is unreasonable to expect that someone who relies on the accused for financial support or has been victimized by them should act as their surety. We recommend strengthening the secondary grounds for detention by including a mandatory provision that someone with 2 convictions for serious violent offenses would be ineligible for bail for 10 years, and those with 3 or more convictions would be barred from bail for life. Recognizing that someone with a proven history of serious and violent victimization may have given up their rights to release at the earliest opportunity is not cruel and unusual. We also cannot overlook the role of victims in the bail process, and therefore, we would like to see the rights strengthened to include access to the details of release within 24 hours, and that in certain crimes, victims be provided with a transcript of the bail hearing upon request. Finally, we recommend that bail pending appeal should only be considered where there is a likelihood of success. Since these individuals are no longer accused, but rather convicted of their current crimes, and therefore no longer entitled of the presumption of innocence. Regarding sentencing and parole, we recommend mandatory consecutive periods of parole ineligibility for multiple life sentences, with a release valve in specific circumstances to address the judicial discretion concerns as noted in Bissonnette. We also suggest amendments to the Correction and Conditional Release Act, particularly as it relates to high-risk prisoners. Specifically, we suggest establishing a separate parole regime for the small number of high-risk prisoners. This regime would include, among other measures, lengthening the interval between parole hearings and granting victims full party status at these hearings. Sadly, considering the high rate of youth violence in our city right now, we also need to propose recommendations to strengthen the existing Youth Criminal Justice Act. We believe many of our suggested changes to the adult system should also be implemented for young people. We also request consideration of expanding the allowable periods of both open and closed custody for young people, so that longer sentences can become a viable option in those cases of violent crimes, weapon offenses, human trafficking, robbery, and sexual assault. These suggestions may seem counterintuitive to the core principles of rehabilitation and restraint when it comes to young people. Still, I want to remind you, we are discussing youths as young as 14 years of age who have committed serious violent offenses, not once, but multiple times. In closing, I'd like to emphasize it might be easy to dismiss our stance as biased or politically motivated. However, for us, this is not a matter of politics. It's about public safety. And we have a proven track record of collaborating with anybody from any party who shares our values. At home in Toronto, our mayor is a lifelong member of the NDP. The chair of our police services board is a Liberal. And as you know, we have a Conservative premier. And yet, we've all set aside political differences to do what's right for the safety of Torontonians and our police members. We urge you at the federal level to do the same. We have shared these thoughts and others with Minister Fraser and the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Pierre Poilievre, in letters dated September 12th of 2025. We'd be happy to make those available upon request. Thank you, and looking forward to any of your questions.
Thank you to all three of you.